Hi, it's Melanie Vota, author, ghostwriter, editor, and book coach. Before I do anything else, I am going to share this to my private Facebook group. So I have to do this on my little phone. And here I am, and I share it to a group. Here we go. All right, so I've shared it to my group, but I'd like to ask anyone in my group who may come on and watch. I don't think anybody's here yet. Please come to the Melanie Vota author page because I will be able to see your comments and questions more easily. It seems to be a problem when you do a Facebook Live in both places that the comments and questions in the group I can't see. So, but if you are there and you decide to stay there, I will go back and look later and make sure that I answer any questions that you have. So today I want to talk to you about bestsellers. Are they important? Do they matter? It's a big topic. Everybody thinks that the goal is to write a bestseller. They want to get on that New York Times bestseller list or at least Amazon, and they wonder how to do it. Well, I have some notes. I'm going to have to check with them to make sure that I don't forget any of the topics I wanted to discuss. Being able to call your book a bestseller is definitely impressive. It's something that especially lay people, meaning people who aren't in the publishing industry, really pay attention to because, frankly, they don't really know what it means. For people in the publishing industry, being on the New York Times bestseller list, yes, it's still something that's impressive, or the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, it's something that's impressive, but it means less. And that's because in the industry, we know that getting on a bestseller list is not just about how many books you've sold. That's what everyone thinks. Everyone thinks it's that these are the top sellers, right? Well, that's not really the case, unfortunately. There's a lot of finagling that goes along with deciding on who gets on these lists. So what I recommend to everyone is that you not worry about being a bestseller, you not think about it. What you need to think about when you're writing a book is quality. What you want is to write a book that people like, that people read all the way through and then recommend it to their friends. Because books like that sell year after year after year, even if it's only 5,000 copies a year, 10,000 copies, 20,000 copies, these are called mid-list books, and the majority of books published by traditional publishers anyway, they fall into that category, into the mid-list category. And mid-list books are the books that keep the publishing industry working. They're the ones that pay the salaries. They're the ones that maintain the companies. So that's really, I think, what you need to go for. If there's anybody out there that you meet who is helping authors and they tell you that they can make your book a bestseller, run fast in the other direction, because nobody can make that promise to you. Nobody. In fact, I've had marketers tell me, oh, put in your messaging that, you can help them write a bestseller. I'm like, no way. No way am I doing that. That is totally out of integrity. No one can make that promise because, again, there are so many factors that go into choosing which books end up on these bestseller lists, and it's not always about sales numbers. So let me look at my list here to make sure I don't forget. Some books, for example, will end up on a top bestseller list on New York Times or Wall Street Journal or USA Today. Hi, Rizal. There are some books that will wind up on the list for like a week, maybe two if they're lucky. And the reason is that they did this big media blitz. They had lots of money to put behind publicity. So they got a lot of buzz, but then when people started reading the book, they're like, and they don't recommend it to their friends, and the sales just go wah, wah, wah. So, it can say it was a bestseller, but it's not staying a bestseller. It's a really, really short period of time. So it's much more important to have a book, like I said, that people like, that people read all the way through, that they recommend to their friends, and keep your sales numbers steady over a long period of time. The list, as I said, there are a lot of factors that go into choosing which books end up on a bestseller list. And as far as sales numbers, they are not accurate. The New York Times uses a lot of discretion, especially. They don't go by the numbers submitted by Nielsen BookScan, which is the source that most publishers use to determine sales. Even Nielsen BookScan isn't entirely accurate because it isn't pulling sales numbers from every source. Even some of the Amazon numbers don't end up there. It's very complicated, too complicated for me even to understand or to convey to you, because there's so many possible places that they can pull sales numbers from. And for instance, some of it has to do with ISBN numbers. That's the number that if you're self-publishing, you have to buy that identifies your particular book. You'll find that number where the barcode is on a printed book. So the reason that Nielsen BookScan doesn't always factor in all the Amazon sales numbers has to do with ISBNs. I don't fully understand it. It's all very complicated. Yes, exactly, Rizal. What a matrix. It is completely nuts, to tell you the truth. So the New York Times does not use BookScan. Wall Street Journal and I believe USA Today both use BookScan, but the New York Times does not. They use sales numbers coming from booksellers, from bookstores, primarily. And I believe they choose only some bookstores. So it's like, what? And somebody did a study and confirmed that the New York Times also favored books by their own journalists. Again, what? And this list of bookstores that the New York Times pulls from is mysterious. They don't disclose it, so we don't know what these stores are, where these stores are. So there's that too. There are also people who try to finagle getting onto the list. And there are actually book laundering firms that will go out and buy your book for a lot of money to try to help you get up there on the bestseller lists. There was apparently some guy who hired people all across the country to go to bookstores and buy all the copies of his book. Did it work? Yes, it did. He actually ended up getting on a bestseller list, but he didn't stay there. He was hoping, I think, that if he bought all the books out for the first week, that people would see him on the list, and then they'd be like, oh, he's on the New York Times bestseller list. I'm going to buy this book. It must be good. Didn't work. His sales numbers started going wah, wah, wah right after that. So as you can see, just getting on a bestseller list doesn't mean more sales. Sometimes it gets people more sales. Sometimes it gets them speaking engagements, media appearances, but not always. You can't count on it. Yes, I'm not kidding you, Rizal. Book laundering. It exists. It's a thing. I know. I didn't even know this. I just found out, and it boggles the mind. But yes, very disreputable, very unethical. There's even an account that a book that only sold 4,000 copies landed on a top bestseller list. Books that sell more sometimes are lower than books that have sold less. Why? Books that have sold a lot sometimes don't get on the list because, say, the New York Times decides it's not good enough quality, even though it's sold really high numbers, it doesn't end up on the list. Certain genres of books don't end up on the list, like Christian books normally don't, technical books, academic books they don't get on the list. So as you can see, in some ways it's kind of a big racket. And I mean, I don't want to say that entirely, but in some ways it is. And um, some people are even thinking that these lists are obsolete. Now, what about Amazon? Amazon doesn't technically have a bestseller list. You can shoot up to the top for a day, maybe a few days. It kind of goes up and down. People call their book an Amazon bestseller when it shoots up. Technically, you aren't. I mean, if that happens to you, by all means, use it because it can help you sell books. But people in the industry, they know. People outside the industry, they don't know, so they're going to think of it as impressive, and maybe it will sell books. But anybody in the publishing industry is going to be like, it doesn't mean anything. You know, really, it doesn't mean much. So let's see, what else do I want to say? This is going to be a short one today. Mainly, I just want to help you to understand that the bestseller goal is really not such a big deal. And it's something that I discourage people from thinking about. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I want to write a bestseller. Yeah, but just think about writing a good book. That's really what it comes down to. There's so many great authors out there who've never been on the lists. So, you know, it okay, sorry. My mind is coming with all these ideas at once. Certainly, I don't want to discourage you from celebrating. If you do end up on a list, if you do, by all means, celebrate it. But don't make it something that you feel disappointed if you don't get there. Because as I've said, and if you're just joining and you haven't heard everything I've said, please go back and listen from the beginning after I'm done, because it really is such a difficult thing to predict. And it has to do with so much more than just sales numbers like people think. So you cannot predict whether or not you're ever going to get on a bestseller list, even if your book sells really well. It just is, there are just so many factors that you cannot control. So what else do I want to say to you? I think that pretty much covered what I wanted to cover on this. I think there's only a couple of you here right now, but do you have any questions? And if you are watching over on my Facebook community and you're listing questions and I can't see them, please don't worry, I will go back and I will answer your questions there. But if you have questions, this is the time, or certainly after you've watched this recording rather than the live, you can ask me questions. I just ask that when you ask questions after the fact that you tag me so that I'm sure not to miss your question. Now, I am not going to be doing a Facebook Live for a couple of weeks. Next week, I am going to be away, and the week after that is Thanksgiving. So I will start back the last week of November. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about yet, but I will announce that as the time draws closer. And I will be around. I'll be on my author page and in my Facebook group to answer questions if you want to post any and on either page. And I will be posting my memes and advice and writing tips and things like that still. So that's all I'm going to say, I guess, about bestsellers. I hope you take my advice and stop worrying about it. And I will see you soon. Bye.